All right, today is Wednesday, the 2nd of November. I literally just sent this email out right now. I have included in this email 3 PDFs, one of which I'm going to go over a little bit, but I don't want to spend too much time lecturing. I want to spend more time doing in here, and a worksheet for you to work on. The first one is called it's React Getting Started, and this is taken right from the React documents. Okay, I literally grabbed everything that's in there and threw it in. Now we can go over this. I don't have a problem going over it. All right. But again, I think that, me sitting there and going over a PDF is like me sitting there and going through PowerPoints. I think you can read through the stuff yourselves with little to no problem. All right. The next one is also taken from there, and it's the actual tutorial. All right. And the last one, and I want to spend just a couple minutes going over this. I may or may not have mentioned this to you at the beginning of the semester. I don't know. But there is a guy, he's got a website that's called the Valley of Code. His name is Flavio Copes, and he puts out a lot of free books. Notice he's got SQL, Express, Go, etc. And I've actually done a bunch of lectures that were based on his HTML handbook, his CSS, his JavaScript, his Node, his React, um, and he redid his Express one. I didn't have a chance to go back and redo that because, like I said, that says it's new. But the point is, one of the ones that's in here is one of the ones I sent you, and that is this React Beginner's Handbook. And I don't want to waste your time, but I just want to hit a couple of the points that are in there. Okay, because again, it's not my intention here to waste your time. But that said, I don't know if there we go. All right, hi John. We're just getting started here, and I mentioned that I sent out an email and it had 3 PDFs in it and a worksheet for you. And the first 2 PDFs that are there are literally right from the React documentation. And this third one that I want to spend just a few minutes going over is from a guy named Flavio Copes, and he has a website called the Valley of Code where you can get all of his PDFs for free. You just have to sign up to be on his mailing list. To be honest with you, I've been on, excuse me, I've been on his mailing list for about 2 years, and I think I get about 1 or 2 emails a year. So it's not like it's anything terrible. It's not a long one. It's 40 pages, and we won't spend, a ton of time going over it. But some of the stuff that's in here, we've already talked about, and a few of the things that are in here, we have not. So I just want to spend a few minutes, hopefully tying up some loose ends, etc. And then we'll go over what we're going to be doing today. All right. So, he talks about why React is popular. He gives a little bit of history, and that's all fine and dandy. Now, this is interesting because he said, how much JavaScript do you need to know to use React? Now, I'm not asking you to, all right, but because I don't know if you were in this, you weren't in the same class with Evan. I think, John, you took the AWD1111 class last summer, and I think that you took it about a year ago, Clayton. But the point is, this is what Mr. Copes has said that you really should understand before you get into React. Now, we've worked with variables, we've worked with arrow functions, we've worked with arrays, we've done some work with JSON objects. All right, we may not have done much work in here with rest and spread, but you should have been at least exposed to them in the AWD1000 class. We have actually looked at a little bit of destructuring. You know what template literals are. You know what classes, callbacks, promises, etc. All those things are. But if you need any, review or whatever, you can always go there. And this guy, he's got articles on each one of these if you want to take a look. And if you don't, that's totally fine. All right. You saw this stuff the other day. React is popular. It's being used by a lot of people, etc. I mean, it's a good way to at least ideally become or to get a job. Now, when I think of a full stack web developer, And this is what I'm still trying to do on that to-do list. And it's the idea that in the same program, we can use both front end JavaScript and back end JavaScript. Front end meaning the stuff that we did in the AWD1000 class, and back end meaning what we're doing right now, and be able to send things back and forth between client and server in that way. To me, that's real full stack. All right. Now, again, you can go in, I mentioned this yesterday, you can go in and do an npm I, create React app if you want to. I don't see any advantage of doing that. If you use the npx instead of doing it npm, all right, that as it says, it allows you to execute the command without installing it. To me, that makes more sense. Again, if you need a little bit more description, you can go over there. All right, we've already gone through and we've done this stuff already, so there's not really anything new right there. All right, he starts to do a to-do list, etc. I hope that we can take this to-do list we're working on and port it over and use it with React also, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. All right. You saw this, well, yesterday and the day before when we talked about when you do your npx create React app, exactly what gets built for you. So we've talked about that before. We've started to run it. You saw the welcome screen, etc. And again, I do want you to understand that virtually everything that you do in React is component based. All right. One of the reasons I think that when people discuss React and its popularity, they talk about its simplicity. You may or may not agree that it's simplistic, but by taking and breaking an application up into multiple components, ideally you see a few things. You can make small components and they're reusable. All right. That's really one of the big things about this. All right. That I think has got people so excited, for lack of better words. We also have talked about in here that virtually anytime you go in and you create components, you can create them as either functional components or you can create them as class components. We talked about the difference between them, that with a functional component, as you see right here, you've got a return. Now, above that return, you can add any code you want. And we did this when we went through the BMI calculator yesterday. On the other hand, when you're working with a class component, it doesn't have a return statement. It gets replaced with a render statement. Also, when you work with that, it must extend up on the top here. It must extend react.component. So again, these are all things that we've talked about before. All right. You have been introduced at least to JSX. All right. And you know what it is. Basically, it allows you to go in and it allows you to put JavaScript or HTML inside of your JavaScript, I should say. We talked about state and we talked about props. You should at least have a fundamental understanding of the difference between the two. And again, when you set up state, you typically set up a variable, and then you also set up set followed by that variable, because state can change throughout the life of the application. It is mutable. On the other hand, when you work with props, those are things that get passed into an application. Those are immutable. And again, we've talked about this stuff. So he gives you an introduction to JSX here. I don't think you need any of this, but you can take a look at it if you're so inclined. You do know by now that when we start coming in here to build this, all right, that there can only be one element that gets returned. All right, and the one element here is a div. You can put as many things inside of that div as you want to or need to. And we've talked about that before. All right, same thing when you render. Okay, when you're using a class-based component, there's only one thing that can be returned. You typically put it inside of a div. If you don't want to do any CSS at all on that div, You can just put in an empty set of brackets. So a less than followed by a greater than, and then a less than slash greater than sign if you want to. And again, we talked about all this. All right. Now I find this interesting. I may have mentioned this in other classes before. I don't know. But it says React gives us this interface for one reason. It's easier to build UI interfaces using JSX. I totally agree with that. But one of the things that gets discussed all the time, and it's probably something Mr. G discussed with you guys in the AWD 1000 class, and I know I do. All right, I know I do in when I teach the AWD 1000 class, and that is that separation of concerns. The idea that your HTML file should just hold your content and then references to your CSS file or files, which hold the presentation, and references to your JS file or files, which allow the interactivity. That said, in a way at least, by using JSX, you're breaking the separation of concerns because what you're doing is you're allowing you to mix or intermix HTML right inside of your JavaScript. Okay. Like I said, there were just a couple things I wanted to mention in here. So, yeah, well, as it says, it looks like HTML, but it's not. And he differentiates in here what's going on. One thing is, and we didn't really talk about it yesterday, but hopefully you realized it, and that is when you set up in HTML, you use the class attribute, but when you use the class attribute in React, just like when you use it in Node, basically, it thinks that you mean object-oriented class, which you sort of do, but it's not exactly the same. So you use class name in here, and it must be used with camel case like that. All right. So he explains that on this page here if you want a better explanation than the one I just gave you. Okay. Yeah, in JSX, you can also embed JavaScript. Okay. Yeah, he talks about that. And we've done that already. We did that yesterday. If you remember, in the same program, in that same BMI calculator yesterday, we when we had our return statement, we had the JSX in there. And in that JSX, we basically set up our form where we set up the height and the weight and the buttons, etc. All right. But then above that, so above what we rendered or we returned, all right, above that, we put in some pure JavaScript. All right. Okay. So you should have an understanding now of what state is. The set of data that is managed by the component. Again, that's his definition. And you should understand what state is. You should understand how state is used. If you read enough documents and enough articles on this stuff, there's different ways that you can set up state. There's a different way that I'll go over with you a little bit later today than the way I set it up yesterday. Why am I showing you two ways? Because there's more than one way of doing it. And if you look at enough code, you'll see that more than one way of doing it. All right. Again, you should have at least start to have an understanding of props. I mean, we've spent what 2 or 3 days on this. That's been it. By no means should you be an expert on this stuff. All right. But one thing I'm going to ask that you do in just a little bit is that you try to go in and develop a very simplistic user interface in React on your own. All right. And we're going to look at that in just a couple minutes. All right. Data flow in a React application. And I had something. Where was that? Oh, I thought I saved it. All right. But it says data typically flows from a parent to a child using props. All right. Data typically does not does not flow back from the child to the parent. It goes downwards. All right. As it says, it flows down. Now, that said, the child can actually go in there and manipulate state, which can change the parent, but the actual flow of data is from parent to child. React, as it says, provides an easy way to manage events fired from the DOM. One thing, and we have not talked about this at all, but one reason that React is so popular is that React does not technically manipulate the DOM, the document object model. You may or you may not be aware of this, but the DOM itself, the document object model, all right, the actual document object model, updating that while a program is going on can take a long time. It may not seem like it to you, but it can actually take a long time to sit there and write JavaScript that manipulates the DOM. So what happens in React is React uses what's called a virtual DOM. And unlike the regular DOM, which typically has to be rewritten and it's the word I'm looking for, basically redrawn all the time. In the virtual DOM, the only thing that has to get redrawn is what is changed. So it's kind of like the concept of AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript, and XML, where you do partial page refreshes. It's pretty much the same kind of an idea. All right. Now, most of the stuff that we're going to do, at least at the beginning of the semester, is when we go in and we add events like this, we'll probably add them most often to buttons. And you'll notice that unlike the regular, if you want to call it that, unlike the regular JavaScript on click, which is ONCLICK, all in lowercase letters, when you use the React on click, the C is capitalized. In other words, the on functions are followed by camel case in the way that this is set up. All right. And typically, as it says right here, you typically define the functions. So this is saying when you click the button, this event that's in here is going to be some kind of a method you want to call, and you don't define that inside of the render or the return. You define it outside of it. All right, and that's what they're talking about here. So you don't put it in the function app or in the class for app, you put it up above it. All right. That's, I don't know, there wasn't too much more. Okay, they do talk a little, they mentioned the life cycle, and it says, so far, you've seen how to manage state with the use state hook. There's more than one state, though. He mentions another one here that's called the use effect hook. And as he says, it allows components to have access to the different life cycle events of a component. All right. There are more use things that you can use in here other than just these. He just mentions a couple and he gives a fairly simple example. All right. The only other thing I wanted to say, I think that's it. Yeah. The only other thing that I wanted to say in here is, and you may care about this, you may not, and it's totally fine either way. All right. What I did when I taught this class a year ago is we went out to freecodecamp.com, and Bob Zaral, who's one of their instructors, has created this class. It's 11 hours long. No, we did not go through the entire class. But in there, you build 8 different projects that go from fairly simplistic to fairly complex. And we went through quite a few of those. Now, why am I not doing that this semester? There's more than one reason. One reason is I think that the reception that I got to doing those was lukewarm at best. People were like, we can watch these on our own, etc. And I get that. All right. And the other thing too is, when I was doing it a year ago, I was in a seated room. Now I'm not. And since I'm taping these, All right. Basically, if I embed a video inside of one of my videos, my videos then get really, really big. And I didn't want to do that. But I've gone through much of the material that's in here. The guy's got a very pleasing style. He knows what the heck he's talking about, etc. So if you have any interest, and again, if you don't, you don't, no problem. So the last thing that I sent you then is this. And this is what we're going to go over now. Please take a look at the heading that's in here once this comes up, or maybe it won't come up. Let's not wait for it. Let me just bring it up because I think I've got it over here also. There it is. So the first thing up here says, right in the heading, these are practice exercises. They're not for turning in. All right. I want to do some of these today, and we're going to do something else tomorrow. Then Monday and maybe Tuesday next week, we're going to build a couple more projects. When we build those projects next week, rather than creating everything like this on our own, what we're going to do is we're going to go out and call external APIs. So we're going to build some projects that are going to go out and get the data that we need from the internet, and then we're going to bring it in. All right. But it is my hope that by sometime towards the middle to end of next week, that we're actually going to start on this last project that we're going to do together, which is going to be, again, some kind of an e-commerce site. And I'm saying this now, it's a little bit early, but I just want you to hear it. If you didn't know this already, there will be no classes 1 week from this Friday. Every Veterans Day is a day off at Rankin for both faculty, staff, and students. So Friday, the 11th, and it just happens that Veterans Day is always the 11th, but it falls on a Friday this year, so there will be no classes on that day. I won't be available. I don't know where I'll be, but I won't be here. All right. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is this. I'm going to give you some time to work on it, and then we're going to go through all of it as a class. All right. And you're not going to have to turn this in. There's actually 3 different assignments in here. I got exercise 1 and 2, but you'll see it in a minute. So I'd like you to go in and build something. It's pretty simple. It's a real simple JavaScript calculator. All right. You can add a number in here. You can add a number in here. And you've got the 4 different functions in here. All right. If you click submit, you haven't put a number in the first one, you get a number 1 cannot be empty. If you don't put anything in the second one, you get a number 2 cannot be empty. You'll see if you put in 33 plus 8, you get the answer. 33 minus 8, you get the answer. 33 times 8, you get the answer. 33 divided by 8, you get the answer. And I use the 2 fixed on there to 2 decimal places. Finally, if you try to divide by 0, you just get a message that says illegal attempt to divide by 0. I'd like you to go in and try to replicate what I've shown you right here. All right. You don't have to turn it in, so I'm not going to know whether you do it or not. The reason I'm asking you to go to that trouble is after you finish, I'd like to see you try to reproduce this as a React calculator. All right. This is not a complete calculator. I'm working on a complete one. And you can go Google React calculators out on YouTube and find a lot of them. All right. And some of them are really good. Some of them are not that good. I'm producing my own because some of these literally don't have that much code in them, but they have a boatload of CSS just to try to make it look like a real pretty calculator. I'm not that concerned with the calculator looking all that great. I'm more concerned with the calculator being functional. So my hope is I can finish that tonight. And what we will go over as a class then tomorrow is we'll go over basically how to create a real live calculator in React as a class. All right. So that's the first part of it. Then for the second part, then it's all right here. It's very small. Okay. I want you to try to code 2 more React projects, simple counter 1 and simple counter 2. They're going to be the same project, but for simple counter 1, just so you get some practice, make it a functional component. For simple counter 2, make it a class component. The interface, you can design it yourself, but it's very simplistic. And what I mean is, it should have two buttons on it, one with a plus sign, one with a minus sign, and then underneath it, add an H1 tag in between the two buttons, or, just center them on the screen or whatever, and take that H1 and initialize it to 0. That's going to be your state variable, the counter. So you're going to have a counter and a set counter. Every time you press the plus button, that number that's in there should go up by 1. Every time you press the minus button, that number in there should go down by 1. All right? And created both as a functional component and as a class component. Now, I said here I'm going to give you an hour to finish this, and I said I'd probably end around 12:20 to 12:30, and it's almost 12:35. So what I will do, and I'll give you a break in there as well. So at 1:45, I'll just ask you guys how you're doing. If you need 15 more minutes, that's fine. But from 2 to 3, I'd like to go over these with you. All right? You don't have to turn them in, but what we work on tomorrow on this regular calculator, all right? Again, I'm not going to have much CSS in it. I will want you to turn that in, all right? So unless you guys have any questions, please go to work on this. And like I said, I'm gonna come in at 12:40 or 1:45 and say, how's it going? And then I plan on at 2 o'clock going over my solution, so to speak, for each one of these. If you don't have any questions, just go ahead and start. All right, because I've got mine done, except I have not done these right here. So I'm going to work on those while you're working on the other stuff. And I'm going to change my share, so it's just going to show, page 1 of this right here. All right. Mhm. All right. You guys need another 15 minutes? Are you ready to start, or what do you want to do?
I'm ready to start, Mr. Scott.
Okay. I had some problems with converting that JavaScript one to the React one, but I'll go over the rest of the stuff I did with you. So right now I will. Let's see. Let me change my share here. All righty. Okay. So taking it from the top then. I didn't think this was hard. I hope that you didn't. All right. I did put a one CSS thing in there. I put some margin top in just so it looked a little nicer. But this was my script file. So let me get rid of this. All right. Again, probably should have done a better job. I threw everything into one file, but checked for the absence of a value in number one, check for the absence of a value in number two, set some local variables here, actually 4 of them. 3 of them I initialized and 1 of them I set to nothing. All right. Then we get down to here. Had to make sure I converted those over because remember when we grabbed the value that, I could have done it up on top too, I guess, but when we grabbed the value initially, the value was a string, so I did a parse float on it. And I'd already checked for it being empty up here, so I can be sure. And since I set it up as a number value, I can be sure that there was a number in it. So then I did a switch on my operator, and I probably should have shown you this also. As far as the HTML, I didn't think, again, it was very hard. It's funny because I couldn't figure out why this wasn't working. I forgot the defer keyword in there. All right. And that, I don't know, I believe I did that. I did, and we really didn't need a form in here. So when I put the form tag in, it was working, but it was still trying to submit the form. So I could have either done a form thing in here and done the prevent default or just remove the form tag. So I just commented the form tag out. That's the way I did it. All right. So here we had a label for the first number that we were putting in. Here was the one for the second number that we were putting in. No, that's the operator there. I'm sorry. Plus, minus, multiply, divide. Here is for the second number that we're putting in. I said on click, call calculate, and also clear screen. And with that clear screen, I hope I copied that in. I just was going to use the same one from the last time I did this. So again, I went over the other stuff, but just to switch, I said, well, I'm either going to add them, subtract them, multiply them, or later on divide them. But for the divide, I wanted to check to make sure that the denominator was not 0. If it was, I just put a legal attempt to divide by 0. Otherwise, I actually did it. And again, I set this to 2 fixed with 2 decimal places. All right. And for a default, this should never be hit, but in case it is, I just put a legal operation in there. And here was my my reload. I've already shown you examples of this running. I don't really know if I have to or not, but this was it. So again, with nothing in there, you get the number 1 cannot be empty. If you put a number in there and nothing there, number 2 cannot be empty. Clear works. And I can add, I can subtract, I can multiply, I can divide. And if I divide and then that's 0, I get that. Okay, I don't think I did that 3-second or the 5-second delay on there. That was just putting in a set timeout. But again, you didn't have to. If you did it, fine. If you didn't, that's also fine. Let me jump over to the counter one that I asked you to do as both a class component and as so as both a class component and as a functional component. So let's take a quick look at those. Why, if that's open, but that is, so there we go. Close that. Let me close that. Save. There we go. All right. So first, here was the class component. And again, this could have been done in a multiple number of different ways. All right, since it's a class, you want to import React, typically component from React. All right, because that's extending component. And this is another way that this can be done. Not the only way, but this is a way that this can be done. All right, I really made this much simpler in the other one. So it expects that you're going to have props in when you do the class app, and you call since it's a constructor and since this extends components, component rather, this is calling the constructor from component and passing props in. Here we are just setting our state. So this is like a set state right here. Basically, we're setting it. It's like a use state 0 that we do with the other one. All right. And then I came in here and said for the increment, this dot state count +1. For the decrement, this dot state count -1. And again, there was not really any reason to have a form in here. We could have, but I didn't. The key thing was doing this and this. And if I bring this up, so let me view my terminal. And I'm going to do my kill here. Make sure there's nothing running on port 3000. And my npm start. The interfaces look the same because I put absolutely no CSS in there. So the minus and the plus. All right, so there's that one. Rid of that as well. All right, I'm going to come in here and again, I'm going to clear this. Whoops. Come on, Jeff. Clear that and clear out the port. And then go over to the other one. So this again was the class component one. And again, with the class component, as we've talked about before, class app extends component, and you will need to use a render inside with a return. On the other hand, with the other one that we did, which was the functional component, all right, simpler. And I did all the work right in here with the set count rather than writing a separate routine. We could have done that as well. But in here, we had to import React and use state from React. All right. And set up the constant, which had our count. And it also had our set count in there. Initialize the count to 0 with the use state statement that's on line 5. Then our return. And again, some of the stuff that's in here, for lack of better words, is superfluous. In other words, I really didn't need another div here and another div here, but I copied the stuff over from the other one that I had done, and I just left the stuff in there. All right, so again, the on click. The other one was just basically the way that we set it up since I'd set up increment and decrement functions. This one was and the other one was the this dot decrement, and the other one was the this dot increment. And then printing it out is just count. So that count, of course, is that count right there that we initialized to 0. And right here, we are decrementing it by 1. And right here, we are incrementing it by 1. Okay. So hopefully you had a chance to at least get a good start on those and get them done. I promise you that by tomorrow, I'm going to fix the version of the other one that I asked you. So you made the easy JavaScript calculator, and I asked you to make an easy React calculator as well. So I'm going to start tomorrow by going over that particular example, okay? So granted, there was not much today in terms of lecture, but tomorrow when you come in, I'm going to first go through how I did this one with the easy React calculator. So we'll go over that line by line. Then we're going to build I'm just forget the JavaScript stuff. We're going to go right into React and we're going to build a React calculator from scratch. Now, that said, it's not going to have every function in the world in it. I mean, I'm not going to put stuff like probably, I mean, I'll see what I didn't write it yet. So I'll see what kind of time I have tonight. At a minimum, it'll have the numbers, and the four mathematical operations at a minimum. All right. But like I said, I've looked at a bunch of videos and some of them are really good, some of them not so good. All right. So that's what we will do tomorrow. Friday will be a lab. And next week, we're going to write a couple of these, probably do a weather app because I know I did that last year and hopefully I can find the code. Plus, we're going to do our own movie app, and I'm going to show you the code that we used last year to do that. For both of those, for the weather app and for the movie app, you are going to be required to go out to a site and register for an API key. Now, that said, there's no cost. All right, you don't have to give them any credit card information. You don't have to give them anything. All right. So we will do one of those on Monday of next week. We'll do another one on Tuesday of next week. And then hopefully starting on Wednesday, we will be able to go in and actually begin the process of talking about MERN and how we're going to put this whole thing together. We'll probably end up building the back end first and then go back and add the front end to it. All right. I've done a little bit of work on it. I'm not going to lie to you, not much work on it. All right. Does anybody have any questions on any of this stuff that I just went over?
Yeah. So could you clarify, like, what is due Sunday?
Yes, and that's a great question. All right. I'm going to rewrite this, but what is due Sunday, I'm just taking for granted. I'd asked you to go through that tic-tac-toe app, but since the code is in there, I can't tell if you did it or not. So either you're going to put your own code out there or you're just going to copy the final product and put it out there. All right, so that's one thing that's due. Secondly, the stuff that we worked on yesterday, so that sheet that we had yesterday with the BMI stuff, I want you to fix that up. And what I'll do is I'm going to make another one for tomorrow for this calculator. I'll combine everything together onto one Word document and I will pass that out, or I will attach it to the email tomorrow and go over it at the beginning of class. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions? Clayton, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Well, hopefully this stuff is at least starting to make a little bit of sense. All right. I'm still looking for the magical article. I have actually found one. I don't know if it's magical, but I found a pretty good one. Where is that one? Right here today. And I'm going to email it to you. I don't think I sent this out to you, but I liked it. I want to read over it again. It's called React Tutorial and Overview and Walkthrough. All right. It's Tania Racia or something like that. And it does a pretty good job of starting from the beginning and going over everything. If I do, I'll send it to you, but I'm going to go through it. I don't want to sit there and keep going over the same stuff over and over and over again. But there might be a few things in here, but I will send you this for I will send you this on Monday or probably tomorrow. And if I think there's anything relevant in it that we haven't talked about yet, I'll go over that tomorrow. So again, tomorrow we'll do two things. We will first go over this simple or easy React calculator. All right, my version of it. And then we will build a React calculator from scratch. Okay, so that's all I've got. I will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.